Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really cracking open something quite extraordinary. It's not just reading history. It's like unlocking a sealed chapter.
Exactly. A story so brutal, so steeped in hypocrisy and this incredibly calculated revenge that, well, the entire county basically conspired to erase it.
Locked it away for 80 years. Astonishing.
It really is. We're talking about the Willowbrook plantation scandal. Imagine the scene. Beaufort, South Carolina, August 12th, 1843. Suddenly, the silence of this, idyllic southern setting is just shattered.
And this wasn't some private affair, right? This exploded outward.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't Kai. It became this devastating public spectacle. Our sources show that within just 3 days, more than 300 citizens gathered. Think about that. 300 people.
Gathered for what exactly?
To witness a punishment. But not just any punishment. This was designed very deliberately, not just to execute people, but to utterly annihilate a white planter's entire identity, his soul, everything.
And the official records just vanished.
Yeah.
Sealed.
Sealed type until 1923. That 80-year gap wasn't accidental. It was a conscious decision, clearly meant to protect the reputations of the powerful families involved.
And maybe protect the whole social structure that, benefited from keeping quiet.
Precisely. So our mission today really is to analyze these records, the trial transcripts, the eyewitness accounts that were hidden away. We want to understand the roles of power, depravity, and, well, the sheer orchestration of destruction in keeping the social order of 1843 intact.
So to get this, we need to step back into that world first. Beaufort, 1843.
Yes, you have to understand the context. It's a world built on, well, stark and often violent contradictions. Reputation wasn't just important, it was everything. It was your existence.
And the Hargrove family, they were at the top.
Right at the very pinnacle of this fragile, wealth-driven society. So breaking the rules, the social code, that wasn't just frowned upon. It was basically inviting complete annihilation.
Okay, let's start with the man at the center of it all, Edmund Hargrove. In 1843, he's 35. Seems like he has it all right.
On paper, yes. Inherited Willowbrook plantation that's 3,000 acres. And the mansion, this grand Greek revival place, only finished a few years earlier, 1838.
So the picture of established wealth and status.
Absolutely. And he looked the part, too. Tall, dark-haired, always impeccably dressed, linen suits, the whole gentlemanly ideal. He spoke with that measured tone of old money.
But his influence went beyond just land and money.
Right. He was on the town council, involved in civic life, but maybe even more significantly in that society, he was a church deacon.
A deacon, wow. That dual role is pretty key here, isn't it?
It's crucial.
Yeah.
As a deacon, he's publicly endorsing the community's moral purity. He's supposed to be the example of the very rigid codes that, well, we now know he was secretly breaking.
So the facade wasn't just for show. It had a real function.
It did. And it gets even more complex. The sources say he was known as a fair master. Now, we have to be careful with that term.
What did fair master actually mean in that context?
It generally meant less frequent or less severe whipping compared to his neighbors. It was this small, almost performative gesture of benevolence.
Which ironically probably gave him more moral cover, right? While he was exploiting people in a different hidden way.
Exactly. It built up his image. Meanwhile, you have the domestic side, Catherine Hargrove. She was born Catherine Burton.
From another wealthy Charleston family, I gather?
Yes. The marriage in 1837 was typical for the elite. It was essentially an arrangement designed to consolidate power and wealth between two prominent families.
And Catherine, she fit the role.
Perfectly, in terms of background. Educated, capable, refined. But there was a problem, a big one. 6 years into the marriage.
No children.
No children. And in 1843, South Carolina, you can guess where the blame usually fell.
On the woman. Always.
Almost invariably. The sources really emphasize this. The pressure on her must have been immense. Her value, her very standing, was diminishing with every year that passed without an heir.
So she's dealing with whispers, pitying looks.
Relentlessly. Failing her primary duty, as they saw it. And she knew Edmund was distant. He rarely visited her bedroom, seemed preoccupied, emotionally absent even when he was there. She felt, fundamentally less than, but she didn't know why. She didn't have the specifics.
And the specifics involved 3 enslaved men on the plantation, Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel.
Yes. And here, we immediately confront the brutal power imbalance. It's inescapable in this story.
Tell us about them. What do the sources say?
We get glimpses. Marcus, 24, described as lighter-skinned, the son of the head cook. He was Edmund's personal valet. Intelligent, moved quietly through the house, trained to anticipate every need.
Okay.
Samuel was 26, Darker skin, muscular build, usually worked in the stables. Apparently, Edmund took notice of him about 3 years before this all blew up. Started finding reasons for Samuel to be around the main house more.
And Daniel.
The youngest, just 21. A carpenter, described as slight, quiet. He seems to have learned very early that invisibility was the safest way to survive on that plantation.
And Edmund managed to keep this hidden for 3 years.
Through a very careful, very calculated setup. He used the east wing of the mansion, claimed it was undergoing long-term renovations, so it's effectively sealed off.
A private space within the house.
Exactly, his sanctuary. It even had its own private entrance from the garden. Inside, it was simple. A large bed, heavy curtains for privacy, and crucially, a strong lock on the door. This is where he met these men, under absolute secrecy.
And we have to stress again this power dynamic. It wasn't consensual, not in any way we'd understand it today.
Not even close. They were legally property. When their master summoned them, refusal wasn't really an option. The sources are chillingly clear on this point.
What do they say specifically?
They state, whether they felt desire, fear, resignation, their feelings were irrelevant. Survival meant compliance. Refusing Edmund meant risking severe punishment, maybe being sold away, separated from family, the ultimate threat.
So compliance brought
What?
small privileges?
Maybe slightly better food, protection from the harshest field labor. But it was a coercive exchange, their bodies and their silence in return for a slightly less brutal existence.
While Edmund maintained his perfect public image, using his absolute power in secret.
That's the crux of it. Well, secrets like this, they take enormous energy to maintain. And they rarely stay buried forever, do they?
Especially with someone like Catherine around. You described her as observant, capable.
Exactly. Trained to manage a large household, notice everything, she started picking up on small things, inconsistencies that didn't quite add up.
Like what? What were the signs?
Little things at first. Edmund always locking that east wing door himself, his moods swinging wildly. She noticed Marcus seemed tense, on edge. Saw Samuel near the garden entrance late one night.
But the most disturbing detail involved Daniel.
Yes. The sources mentioned she occasionally saw faint bruises on Daniel's neck, marks that looked like they could be from, well, fingers or even lips. At first, she pushed these thoughts away. The idea of her husband, a deacon, involved in something like that was just unthinkable in her world. Sodomy was an abomination.
But the denial couldn't last.
No, it eventually crumbled. On the night of August 11th, 1843, Catherine decided she had to know. The uncertainty, the diminishing of her own life, it became unbearable.
So what did she do?
She waited. Heard Edmund go down the servants' stairs, waited maybe 10 minutes, giving him time to get settled in his sanctuary. Then she followed, silently, barefoot, through the dark garden to that private east wing entrance.
And the door was unlocked. Or ajar.
Slightly ajar, according to the transcripts. Enough for her to see inside.
Yeah.
And what she saw wasn't some quick, drunken mistake.
No. What was it then?
The scene described is one of deep intimacy, familiarity. The transcript calls it a comfortable, ongoing, practiced relationship. Edmund was there with Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel.
All three?
All three were present in the room. The act itself, sodomy, was a capital crime, punishable by death for everyone involved, white or enslaved. But for Catherine, it went beyond just the crime.
It was the emotional betrayal.
Yes, and the depth of it, the sheer otherness of the life he was leading. The records highlight one specific devastating moment for her.
What was that?
She watched Edmund kiss Marcus, and the source says it was with a tenderness she herself had never experienced in 6 years of marriage.
Oh, that's brutal.
And then she saw Daniel whisper something to Edmund, and Edmund laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh. A laugh she realized she hadn't heard from him in years.
So he was truly himself, authentic, but only with them, not with her.
Exactly. And in that instant, her feelings, her humiliation, it didn't just stay as personal hurt, it crystallized into something else.
Right.
The sources describe it as pure, focused, calculating rage. She saw that she'd sacrificed years into a social judgment, felt her own worth drain away, all while he was living this hidden, authentic life.
And her reaction wasn't tears or shouting.
No. Chillingly deliberate. No confrontation. She slipped back to her room, hands steady, breathing calm. Sat down and wrote 3 letters.
3 letters. This is where she acts.
She weaponizes the system. She wrote down everything she saw, sparing no detail. 1 letter went to Sheriff Charles Denore, 1 to Edmund's own mother.
And the third.
The third, she slid under Edmund's locked east wing door, telling him exactly what she knew, what she'd seen.
So he'd find it in the morning.
Yes. And then she lay down on her bed, fully dressed, and waited for dawn. She'd set the machine in motion. His total destruction was now just a matter of time.
So dawn breaks. Edmund finds the letter. What happens then?
Pure panic initially. The sources say his first instinct was just to run, disappear, abandon Willowbrook, everything.
But he couldn't, could he?
He realized very quickly he couldn't. His entire identity, his status, his protection, it was all tied up in the Hargrove name and that plantation. Without them, he was nothing. His wealth was literally his shield.
Did he try to talk to Catherine?
He did. One last desperate attempt. Went to her bedroom door, knocking frantically, pleading.
And her response?
Ice cold. Final. Delivered through the locked door. She said, "There is nothing to discuss, Edmund. You are a sodomite. That is what you are. That is all you are."
Wow, just reducing him entirely to that single act, erasing everything else he was.
Completely. It was a verbal execution before the legal one even began.
And the sheriff arrives soon after.
Sheriff Denore arrived around 7:30 a.m. An older man apparently knew Edmund since he was a boy, which must have made it even harder.
How did Catherine handle the sheriff?
Calmly. The records note her calm, measured tone, almost like she was reporting a property dispute, not accusing her husband of a capital crime. That detachment made it seem factual, undeniable.
And Denore knew immediately this was huge.
Oh, yes. He understood the implications instantly. Catherine led him and his deputies straight to the east wing. The unmade bed, lamps still burning from the night before, it corroborated her story perfectly.
This wasn't just about Edmund anymore, was it? This threatened the whole social fabric.
Absolutely. This was a crisis of order. Edmund Hargrove was elite, a pillar of their society. His crime had to be dealt with publicly and harshly to maintain the hierarchy.
Because if the rules didn't apply to men like him,
Then the whole system of control starts to look shaky. The moral authority collapses. His destruction became necessary for the preservation of the status quo.
So the arrest itself, was there resistance?
None. Edmund just stood there, face blank with defeat, according to the accounts. He held out his wrists for the shackles.
Did he say anything else to Catherine?
As they led him away, he apparently gave her one last, quiet warning. This will destroy you as much as it destroys me.
And her reaction.
Just that cold, terrible smile the source mentions. She was already positioning herself. She told him she'd survive as the wronged wife, the innocent victim. She was playing the role society expected, ensuring her own survival while orchestrating his complete downfall.
It's quite something. By turning him in, she becomes the guardian of morality. The law protects her because she's enforcing it, even against her own husband.
Precisely. She used the system perfectly to her advantage.
And what about Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel in all this?
They were the immediate collateral damage, dragged from the slave quarters in chains shortly after Edmund's arrest.
And legally, they had no standing.
None whatsoever. The law offered them zero defense. The sources are blunt. Slaves had no legal defense against such charges. Their guilt was assumed. They were just swept up in the master's fall. By noon that day, all four men were locked away in separate cells. So the responsibility now falls on Judge Howard Middleton. He's described as 68, a War of 1812 veteran, known for being pretty rigid about the law.
And the law was clear. Sodomy meant death.
The South Carolina statute was unambiguous, death penalty for all involved. But, and this is a huge but, executing a wealthy white man from a founding family like the Hargroves was basically unheard of.
Why was that such a problem?
It set a dangerous precedent. It suggested that the elite weren't immune, that their moral feelings could have the same ultimate consequences anyone else's. That undermines the whole basis of their privilege and power. Other elites with secrets would get nervous.
Right. So Middleton couldn't just follow the letter of the law without causing ripples.
Exactly. So on August 15th, he convenes this private meeting. Just the key players. Sheriff Denore, the county prosecutor Richard Fellows, the mayor, and two powerful church deacons.
And the debate wasn't about whether Edmund was guilty.
No, his guilt was accepted based on Catherine's testimony and the evidence. The debate was purely about the consequences, how to punish him in a way that upheld morality but also preserved the social order and protected the elite class.
Let's unpack that debate. The mayor was worried about money, wasn't he?
Yes. The mayor's main concern was economic stability. Executing Edmund would throw his huge estate into chaos. Think about the land, the debts, the hundreds of enslaved people who'd need to be sold and managed. He argued it could destabilize the whole county. Keeping the Hargrove name financially intact, even if Edmund was gone, was his priority.
But the prosecutor pushed back.
Richard Fellows argued that justice had to be blind. Letting Edmund off lightly just because he was rich would send a terrible message. It looked like there was one law for the rich and another for the poor. He insisted the moral crime was the same, regardless of status, which was actually a pretty radical idea for that time and place.
And the church deacons, what was their take?
They saw it as a spiritual crisis, pure and simple. They demanded zero mercy. For them, failing to impose the harshest penalty would be like condoning the sin itself, offending God and undermining the community's moral foundation.
So Middleton's caught between upholding the law, protecting the elite, managing the economy, and satisfying religious fervor. Quite the balancing act.
A very difficult position. And his solution was, well, incredibly calculated. He decided Edmund would not be executed.
Why not, if the law demanded it?
Because, in Middleton's view, a quick death would almost be a mercy. It wouldn't achieve the necessary level of social cleansing and warning. And crucially, it might make Edmund a sort of martyr.
A martyr? How so?
Someone punished too harshly, perhaps pitied. Middleton wanted to avoid that. So instead of a swift death, he proposed what the sources call a fate worse than death.
Worse than death. What did that entail?
Public humiliation designed to strip away his identity, his soul, his reputation, piece by piece, leaving him alive but utterly broken and marked forever. He chose punishments usually reserved for lower status crimes.
Specifically?
3 full days locked in the pillory, dawn till dusk, exposed to the heat, the insects, the constant verbal abuse from the crowd.
Yeah.
Total degradation.
And whipping, too.
Yes. At noon each day, a public whipping. 20 lashes each day, totaling 60. Enough, the judge specified, to scar him permanently, so everyone would always see the mark of his crime. It was about making him a living symbol of transgression.
A profound act of social demotion, locking a planter in the pillory.
Absolutely. And then there was the fate of Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel. Middleton's initial plan for them was different.
What was the initial plan?
To hang them the day before Edmund's public punishment began.
Why before?
The reasoning was cold, based on property law and social control. They were seen as property who corrupted their master. Their elimination was necessary to restore order, to remove the source of the disruption, and to reassert control over the enslaved population.
Even though everyone knew Edmund was the one with the power, Sheriff Denore apparently tried to argue this point.
He did. Denore pointed out the obvious injustice. Hargrove initiated it. The enslaved men had no real choice. They couldn't refuse.
But Middleton rejected that.
Completely. He basically said the law required all participants be punished, regardless of coercion. But more importantly, the white community needed to see the enslaved men eliminated to feel the natural order was restored. Their deaths served a symbolic purpose, reinforcing white supremacy, irrespective of their lack of agency.
So, the judge has this plan. Brutal, calculated, designed to destroy Edmund while controlling the narrative. But he didn't count on Catherine, did he?
No, he really didn't anticipate the sheer depth of her need for vengeance. She wasn't in that private meeting, obviously.
So how did she find out about the plan?
Through the grapevine, essentially. A young clerk who worked for the judge was apparently trying to court Catherine's cousin. He let slip the details of the planned sentence.
And Catherine wasn't happy with it, even with the pillory and whipping.
Not satisfied at all. She saw a flaw in Middleton's logic, a potential escape for Edmund, psychologically at least.
What was the flaw?
If Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel were hanged before his punishment, Edmund would be alone in that pillory for 3 days. Catherine feared he might garner sympathy. People might see him as tragic, maybe even pitied for having loved his slaves too much, sacrificing himself.
She couldn't allow any possibility of him being seen as a martyr.
Absolutely not. That narrative was unacceptable to her. She needed his destruction to be complete, unambiguous, with no room for romantic interpretation. She needed everyone to see the direct consequences of his actions on others.
So she took action again?
Immediately. She requested a private meeting with Judge Middleton himself. And think about the symbolism here. She went to his chambers, dressed in full mourning black.
Like she was embodying death itself.
Precisely. She wasn't just the wronged wife anymore. She was presenting herself as the agent of his final absolute end.
And what did she ask the judge for? It must have been extreme.
It was unprecedented and astonishingly cruel, even by the standards of the time. She demanded the punishments happen simultaneously. She insisted that Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel be forced to stand near the pillory throughout Edmund's 3 days of suffering. They had to watch him endure the heat, the jeers, the whipping.
Why? What was the point of that?
To ensure Edmund couldn't escape the reality of what he had caused. Their presence would be a constant living accusation. He couldn't look away from the human cost of his desires.
And that wasn't all, was it? There was a final twist.
The final twist. the absolute masterstroke of psychological torture. She demanded that Edmund, after enduring 3 days of agony, be forced to watch Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel be executed on the afternoon of the third day.
My God, she wanted him to see them die because of him.
Her justification, as recorded, was chillingly direct. She told the judge, "Let him see what his desires have cost. Let him watch those 3 men die knowing his actions brought them to the gallows. Let the entire town see the complete picture of his depravity and its consequences."
She wasn't just asking for punishment. She was asking the state to inflict profound psychological torture to satisfy her personal vengeance.
Exactly. She wanted his soul crushed by guilt and despair, not just his body broken by the whip.
And Judge Middleton, did he agree to this?
Remarkably, yes. The source notes he called her request remarkably cruel, but he granted it.
Why would he agree to something so extreme?
His reasoning was that justice should be complete. The entire story should be told. In a way, Catherine's plan served his purpose too. It made the spectacle even more powerful, linking the master's sin directly to the death of the enslaved, reinforcing the idea that such transgressions destroy everything around them. It completed the narrative of total annihilation. Okay, so the trial itself, August 18th, it happens quickly. And really, it wasn't about finding guilt that was already decided. It was about setting the stage, establishing the moral justification for the spectacle to come.
The courtroom was packed, I assume.
Absolutely packed. The county elite, morbid curiosity. Edmund was there, described as looking like a ghost, hollow-eyed, already defeated.
And Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel?
They were brought in, guarded in chains. The accounts note their different reactions. Marcus seemed resigned, terribly still. Samuel was radiating this quiet, contained rage, and Daniel, the youngest, was visibly shaking, crying.
The contrast must have been stark. And then Catherine testified.
Yes, she was the key witness, dressed significantly again, this time in dark gray, suggesting dignity, sorrow, not vengeance. She spoke clearly, steadily, laid out the events of that night in precise, damning detail.
Did the defense try to challenge her? Maybe suggest insanity?
They tried, floated the idea of temporary insanity, moral confusion on Edmund's part, but Catherine shut it down immediately. Her reported words were sharp. That is not temporary insanity. That is deliberate choice. That is who he is, just brutal honesty.
And the enslaved men, could they speak, defend themselves?
No, absolutely not. That's the core injustice here. They were not allowed to testify, couldn't offer any counter-narrative or context. Their fate was sealed by Catherine's word and the legal assumption of their guilt as property. They were silenced.
So the verdict was quick.
Less than 10 minutes of deliberation, the sources say. Predictable. Edmund Hargrove, guilty of sodomy. Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel, guilty of sodomy and the charge of corrupting their master.
That charge itself is telling, isn't it? Placing the blame on the powerless?
It perfectly reflects the power structure. Then Judge Middleton delivered the sentence, incorporating Catherine's demands.
The 3 days in the pillory, 60 lashes, witnessing the execution.
Exactly. And for Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel, death by hanging on the afternoon of the third day. The whole town of Beaufort was now just waiting for the spectacle to begin.
So, day one of the punishment, what was it like?
It started at dawn the next day. Edmund was brought out, stripped to the waist, locked into the pillory. Immobile, exposed to the blistering sun, the flies, the constant gaze and jeers of this huge crowd, the records estimate 347 people were there on the first day.
347 people watching one man suffer.
And Catherine was there too, watching from a slight distance but making sure he could see her. A constant reminder.
Then came the whipping at noon.
Sheriff Denore stepped forward with the whip. The sound of the first lash cracking across Edmund's back reportedly silenced the crowd for a moment. By the 10th lash, he was screaming. By the 20th, just uncontrollable sobbing, his body convulsing, blood everywhere. He collapsed when they released him, barely conscious, dragged back to a cell.
Hard to even imagine. And day two.
Day two was the breaking point, according to the accounts. Another 20 lashes on his already raw, lacerated back. He was beyond any composure, screaming, begging for mercy, which obviously didn't come. A doctor who examined him later noted he'd never seen someone whipped that severely who was expected to survive. The intent was clearly psychological destruction.
Not just pain, but utter degradation.
Total. And then came day three, the final day.
The crowd was even larger.
Yes, people had traveled from neighboring towns. They knew this was the climax of the executions. A new structure was there overnight. The gallows. Positioned perfectly so, Edmund, locked back in the pillory, had a clear, unavoidable view.
So the final lashes first.
The last 20 lashes. He was barely conscious afterwards, just hanging there. But the doctor was under orders to keep him awake, keep him watching. Catherine's final twist needed him conscious.
And then they brought out Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel.
Yes, led to the gallows. The minister offered prayers. Marcus and Samuel were silent, composed in their own ways. But Daniel, the young carpenter who had learned invisibility, he spoke.
What did he say?
He refused the minister's prayers. And looking out at the crowd, he said something incredibly powerful. If there is God who sees what is happening here today and does nothing to stop it, then that God is no God at all.
Wow. A moment of absolute moral clarity in the face of injustice.
And Samuel also spoke. He warned the crowd directly. Remember what you did here today, a chilling reminder of their complicity.
And then the execution itself.
At 2:15 p.m., the executioner pulled the lever. Edmund watched them drop. The transcripts describe the sound he made, and not a scream of pain, but this low, wailing cry, a sound of pure anguish and despair and guilt.
The physical torment was over, but the psychological destruction complete, just as Catherine planned.
Absolutely complete.
So after the execution, after that final act of cruelty, what happened to Edmund?
That same evening, Judge Middleton quietly released him from jail. The advice was blunt. Leave South Carolina immediately, change your name, disappear. Pray no one ever recognizes you or learns your story.
Did he leave?
3 days later, he was gone. Took nothing with him. Willowbrook, his name, his past, all gone. He ceased to be Edmund Hargrove.
And the plantation, the people.
Willowbrook was sold off at auction to pay debts. And crucially, the enslaved community there was broken up. Marcus's wife, Rachel, mentioned specifically in the records, was sold away. Separated from her husband's memory, her community. Complete disruption.
And Edmund himself, did anyone ever hear of him again?
Just rumors. Maybe Texas, maybe California looking for gold. Maybe he just died somewhere unknown. He was effectively erased from history.
And Catherine, what was her fate?
She went back to Charleston, resumed her maiden name, Petton, lived out the rest of her long life. She lived until 1924, age 87, presenting herself exactly as she intended. The wronged wife, the innocent victim. She never remarried.
So she succeeded in preserving her social standing.
She did. But the sources note that people who knew her afterwards saw a change, a new quality in her eyes described as hard and cold. The experience clearly marked her too, just differently.
Which brings us back to the sealed records. 80 years of silence. Why so long?
It was clearly a deliberate strategy. Waiting until 1923 ensured that almost everyone directly involved, the Hargroves, the Middletons, the Denores, the main witnesses, would likely be dead. It protected the reputations of those families and shielded the romanticized image of the Old South from this very ugly truth.
Was anyone looking into it before 1923?
There were whispers. A historian named Thomas Bradford researched the case back in 1897 based on local lore. He couldn't access the sealed files, but he noted even then how the community used spectacular public violence to enforce its rigid moral codes. He saw how eagerly people participated in destroying one of their own to reaffirm their values.
And when the documents were finally unsealed,
They revealed the full, complex, and brutal picture. The legal maneuvering, the calculated cruelty, the specific role Catherine played. It was much darker and more intricate than the rumors. Historians finally got the mechanism of how this destruction was engineered.
which leads to the legacy today. You mentioned a historical marker.
Yes, placed in 2015 near where the gallows likely stood. It specifically acknowledges Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel, though their last names remain unknown. It calls their execution an injustice, noting they were executed for crimes they could not have refused to commit.
So it acknowledges the victims.
Declares victims, yes. But here's the ambiguity the source material really digs into. The marker completely ignores Edmund and Catherine.
Why? Why leave them out?
Because arguably, their roles resist easy categorization. And maybe we today prefer simpler narratives of good versus evil, victim versus perpetrator. Willowbrook is messy.
How so? Unpack that messiness.
Well, Edmund, unquestionably a perpetrator, right? He abused his power, coerced these men. But he was also a victim of his society's rigid intolerance. He was destroyed, in part, for being unable to conform to the narrow definition of white Southern gentleman. His authentic self was deemed monstrous,
And Catherine.
a genuine victim of a terrible marriage, of societal expectations that diminished her. But she wasn't just passive. She became an active perpetrator of, frankly, extraordinary cruelty. Her vengeance went far beyond what even the harsh laws required. She orchestrated psychological torture.
Victim and perpetrator intertwined in both figures.
Exactly. And what about the crowd? Those 347 citizens watching, they weren't just passive bystanders. They were participants, validating the violence, learning the lesson that social order sometimes required blood sacrifice.
So the story is disturbing because it doesn't offer easy heroes or villains.
Precisely. It shows how a system of hierarchy, when threatened, can justify almost any level of cruelty. It reveals how quickly compassion can evaporate when brutality gets framed as necessary justice. Hashtag outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Willowbrook scandal, it really highlights the central disturbing paradox, doesn't it? Using a strict moral code about sodomy, not really to protect morality, but to enforce a rigid racial and economic hierarchy.
Absolutely. And we saw how calculated cruelty became the tool. Not just state-sanctioned cruelty through Judge Middleton's careful legal calculus, but also intensely personal cruelty, wielded by Catherine to ensure utter annihilation.
The source material we've been working from, it leaves us with a pretty chilling final thought, doesn't it? About human nature, maybe.
It really does. The authors pose this question directly. Has the human capacity for cruelty in service of maintaining social order, for creating scapegoats and demanding blood sacrifices to appease collective fear and rage, had any of that truly changed? It's a tough question to sit with.
And it connects back to that modern historical marker we discussed. It remembers the clearest victims, Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel, and calls their deaths an injustice, which is right.
But it remains silent on the complex figures of Edmund and Catherine, the destroyers who were also, in their own ways, destroyed or damaged by the system.
So the final provocative thought for you, the listener, is this. What does that silence tell us? When we choose to remember historical injustice, but we only focus on the parts that fit a simpler moral story, omitting the messy complexities of the perpetrators, the collaborators, the victims who also inflict pain. What understanding do we lose? How does that shape our view of the past and maybe how we deal with injustice today?